What's keeping you? What's keeping you from a job? What's keeping you from another opportunity? What's keeping you from money? What's keeping you from doing doing what you feel like you need to do it? Now, originally, I was gonna have that be sort of a negative question, sort of a negative connotation. What's keeping you? But now that I thought about it a little bit more before this, it can be honestly both a negative and a positive. So that's what I want to use it for today. Turn with me to 1 Samuel 17, 1 through 50. Again, that's 2 Samuel, or 1 Samuel 17, 1 through 50. Now, I know that's a long set of verses, but we're going to kind of feed through this, because these verses just have three main points that I want to hit on. They have three mini chapters in the saga. Now, the Philistines gathered their army together to battle, and were gathered at Succoth, which belonged to Judah. They were encamped between Succoth and Ezekah in Ephraim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they were encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in the battle array against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on one mountain, and on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with the valley between them. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath, from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with the coat of maul. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, and a silver went out before him. Now I want to stop right there. These may seem like kind of a lot of, I was going to say insignificant detail, but that's not what I mean. This could seem like a lot of unnecessary detail. Like it's describing his armor, it's describing everything. And, I mean, when you make a good story, you kind of want some detail. But this may seem superfluous, but this is leading somewhere when we get to the end of the story. But right now, we just wanted to paint him as the narrative. Just wanted to paint him as intimidating. I mean, you could see why people would be scared to fight this guy. I mean, he was 6 cubits high in a span. He had what seemed like the latest and heaviest armor for the day. So you could see why he was painted as intimidating. Verse 8. Then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel, and said to them, Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servant of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come out to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants, and serve us. And the Philistines said, edify the armies of Israel. This day give me a man, that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. And like I said, you see why they were greatly afraid, because the narrative painted his armor and painted Goliath himself as a very intimidating force. Now David was the son of that Ephraite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, and who had a son. And the man was old, advanced in years, in the days of Saul. And the man was old and advanced in years in the days of Saul. The three oldest sons of Jesse had gone to follow Saul to battle. The names of his 6 sons who went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, next to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest, and the 3 oldest followed Saul. Now this was traditional for the oldest 3 sons, or at least the eldest son, to go into battle. But catch something here now that I'm thinking about it. It said David was the youngest. Now I'm the oldest of 3. Imagine being the youngest of 8. I'm not saying nothing was expected of you, or you weren't expected to amount to anything, but at least as far as the firstborn was concerned, and even the second and the thirdborn, I mean, you weren't really pressured as much as they were to live up to expectations in the legacy of the family, the birthright, as we saw in Jacob and Esau. That the birthright, as we saw in Jacob and Esau, the birthright was very important. Was very vital this day, especially back then. But David occasionally went and returned from Saul to feed his farmer's sheep at Bethlehem. And Philistine drew near and presented himself 40 days, morning and evening. Then Jesse said to his son David, take now for your brothers an ephah of this dried grain, and the 10 loaves, and run to your brothers at the camp, and carry the 10 cheeses to the captain of their thousand, and see how your brothers fare, and bring back news of them. Excuse me. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. So David rose early in the morning. He had to sleep with the keeper, and took the things, and went as Jesse commanded him. And he came to camp as the army was going out to the fight and shouting for the battle. They were kind of trash talking each other, just posturing to each other. Self-evident there. For Israel and the Philistines had drawn up battle array, army against army. And David left his supplies in the hand of the supply keeper, ran to the army and came and greeted his brothers. Then as he talked with them, there was the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the army of the Philistines. and he spoke according to the same words. According to the same words, so meaning very well he could have been saying this for the entire 40 days and nights. And all the men of Israel and they saw the man, fled from him, and were dreadfully afraid. So the men of Israel said, "Have you seen this man who has come up? So he has come up to fight Israel. And it shall be that the man who killed him, the kingdom rich with great riches, will give him his daughter and his father's house, exempt him from taxes in Israel." Now something that I remember that I forgot to talk about earlier. At this point, the kingdom had already been, even though it's still technically king, the kingdom has been stripped from Saul at this point. There was going to be another king anointed, and that king was David. He was already anointed king at this point. But, as the text says, he says, all this will be added to him, basically. He's a daughter and the riches of Saul's house and everything. So that just, and exempt them, and giving father's house exempt them from taxes in Israel. So it just really, I won't say funny, haha, but it's funny, ironic how God works that out sometimes. This young man is already going to be king one day. God's anointed it, and anything God's anointed is going to happen. But it's just a little, I guess I would say insurance. It's just kind of an incentive for David to sort of go young, I guess I'm meaning. And then David spoke to the man who stood by him, saying, "What shall be done for the man who killed the Philistine, and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God?" Now, important too, this is the first mention in each of this narrative of verses. This is the first mention of God that we get. Goliath called Israel the servants of Saul. They're really meant to be servants of God, but he called them servants of Saul. David's the one who really invokes the name of God. Indeed, the first that we can see in the narrative following. But that's just interesting that he reminds them, hey, we're servants of God. He doesn't, he's not defying us, he's defying God. And you do not want to defy God. It's going to end up in a bad time for you. And the people answered him in this matter, saying, "So it shall be done to the man who killed them." Now Eliab, his older brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger was aroused against David. And he said, "Why did you come down here? And with whom have you yapped for you sleep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the entities of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle." And David said, "What have I done now? Is there not a cause?" Then he turned from him, that'd be David, then he turned from him toward another, and said the same thing. And these people answered him as the first one did. So when the words which David spoke were heard, They reported them to Saul, and he sent to them, and he sent for them. Then David said to Saul, and he sent for him, I think I said them, I meant him. Then David said to Saul, yet no man's heart failed because of him. Your servant will go and fight with the Philistine. And Saul said to David, you are not able to go against the Philistine to fight with him, for you are youth, and he a man of war from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant used to keep his father's sheep. And when a lion and a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. That's the second time, but it's just a little funny to me. David compares Goliath to a wild, raging animal. So just sass from David there. But that's the second time he's mentioned defying the armies of the living God. So David's the only one who seems to know the score here. Like I say, I can sympathize with fear and everything. I can sympathize with it. But David does remind them, and even remind the king, hey, you're servants of the living God here. Have we forgotten what God had done for us? Even the records we have up to now? What God had done for our people? And we're afraid of this guy who defies the living God? Moreover, David said, the Lord God, the Lord, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hands of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord will be with you. Now to Saul's credit, he does acknowledge that the Lord is powerful, and the Lord will be with him, and that could be a thing unto David. But watch what he does next. So Saul killed David with his armor, and he put a bronze helmet on his head. He also killed him with the coat of maul. David fastened the sword to his armor and tried to walk, for he had not tested them. And David said to Saul, I cannot walk with these, for I have not tested them. Though basically he hadn't had any practice with them. He hadn't tried out scenario to get better with them. So David took them off. Now, I can understand Saul's thinking, but further on in Scripture, ironically, it does talk about putting on the armor of God. But the armor of God is way more powerful than this stuff. So he took his staff. Then he took his staff in his hand, and he told himself 5 smooth stones in the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag, in a pouch which he had, and his thing was in his hand. And he drew near the Philistine. God will always provide, will always give supernatural strength to what you got. Not for your own sake, but for his. and he drew near the Philistine. So the Philistine came and began drawing near to David, and the man who bore the shield went before him. So I don't think he always carries his own shield. He has a shield barrel with him. And when the Philistine youth saw David, he disdained himself, or he disdained him, for, oh, hold on. Yeah, there we go. My phone's sort of wigged out on me again. And when the Philistine saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and good-looking. I get a narrative called him good-looking, which tracks with the rest of the narrative, which we're not going to get into today, but it just tracks with the rest of it. But just it's funny that it takes time to call him good-looking. Though the Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Not by David's living God, not by the one true God, but by the pagan gods that the Philistines had. And the Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give you flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." Then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with the sword, with the spear, and with the javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have to fight. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcass of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all the Simeons shall know that the old God does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is yours, and it will give you into our hands." So it was, when the Philistine arose and drew near to meet David, that David hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. Then David put his hand in his bag and put out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the Philistine so that stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on the face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. So then he does what he said he'd do. He takes the sword and cuts off the guy's head. Takes the guy's own sword. We see that a miracle happened. But not just that. I was talking to my nephew some time ago, and I forget how we got on the subject. I think it was some joke I made. But we're talking about Nick Handius in the church, and he was asking me about him, and I just said in a very simplified way. But the Bible does talk about Nick Handius and everything, but some people want to twist that verse and take it without God. They want to take it as an all or nothing thing instead of a very specific thing. you notice what happened here. There was a miracle that God formed through David, which 5 foot stone and a statue. But it wasn't enough that David just said, oh God will give me, I have faith. Yet on the scripture, Jesus himself said, now Jesus quoting the verse, but Jesus himself said, it is written, you shall not put your God to the test. But a lot of people want to do that. A lot of people want to put God to the test in an attempt to say, oh, God didn't do this, or God didn't do that, but the Bible said he would. I mean, he must not be real, or he must not be very powerful if he's not going to do it. But no, miracles don't happen on account of you. Miracles happen on account of God. There was nothing with the position that David was in. God didn't owe David anything, but we see a couple times before David gave the credit to God. David gave the glory to God. David took the focus off the army of Israel, off how insignificant and weak they were compared to Goliath, and put it on God. Like I say, I can understand the fear, but God works in his timing. God doesn't work in yours. And like I say, this grimy little shepherd boy was the youngest of 8, was not really supposed to amount to, well, it didn't amount to as much as his older brothers were expected to, because he was the youngest of 8 again. But he had the score. He was the only one who did. He was the only one who said, hey, this guy over here, I'm not going to focus on how big he is. I'm not going to focus on any of that. He's defying the word of God. He's defying the armies of God. Why hasn't someone done something about him? Like he's defying the armies of God, the armies of our God, the armies of the God of our fathers and our forefathers. I mean, why are we running scared of this uncircumcised pagan guy? I can understand the fear, but that fear is nothing compared to the power of God. I mean, I'm not saying put yourself in reckless situations. That's what the people who try to test God. Not that all of them are acting in good faith. In fact, they argue most of them aren't acting in good faith. But it's about God and what he can do. What he can do for you, but more importantly, the glory that God is going to get to himself through them, is going to give to himself, rightfully so, through the miracle that he does. I'm sorry if the guy who was walking behind, and he saw Jesus, and he asked Jesus to heal him, and his disciples asked Jesus, "Who sinned?" I'm so he spent years and years praying to God. He spent years and years beseeching God and asking him to be healed from this affliction. But Jesus said, "It is so the Father in heaven may be glorified." So that's why he may be waiting. But you have to also put that in perspective, because some people, I won't say the will of God, because that sounds bad out of context. But some people don't even move at all. I mean, some people are just waiting for the right time or waiting for the moment. But God's saying just have faith, like David did. God's saying just have faith that God Himself will be with you, because you never know what's going to be waiting for you on the other side of just trusting God. Like, I started this YouTube channel 8 years ago, and I love it. And even though it's not as successful as I thought it would be, like, I see other people being having the success that I want, but I know that God has something to do through it. Anytime that you honor God, God will honor you, but anytime that you honor God, that honor does not come back fruitless because you are honoring God. I mean, you're honoring God simply because He deserves to be honored. I mean, you're honoring God simply because He deserves to be, not for anything you can get out of it, not for any financial gain or anything. Now, awesome enough, amazing enough, through that honoring of God, we do have heaven waiting for us, but we should just remember we honor God because He is worthy to be honored, even if we seemingly don't get anything out of it. I mean, we should honor God just for that reason. I understand frustration, I understand being scared, but if you set your perspective just a little bit to just honoring God because He deserves to be honored, you'll be flying, and you'll be doing that more simply because He deserves it. The fact that you have breath in your lungs is, the fact that God is who He is enough in and of itself, but the fact that you have breath in your lungs is cause enough to use it for praising God, because God gave you that breath. You may be waiting, and you may be waiting on the wrong thing. Your perspective may be, your priorities may be a little skewed. The honor God simply because He deserves to be so, for no reason else. Because if you don't honor God for any other reason than you could, or if you choose to honor God for another reason, maybe for success or anything, then you could find yourself right in the trapping of the enemy where you do not want to be. And you could find yourself, when you don't have success, you could find yourself going, oh, what's the point? What's the point of doing that? The point is to just honor God because he deserved to be honored as David did. David wasn't really expecting financial gain and all that. He didn't do it so God would owe him one. He killed that Philistine because he was defying. He was defying God. He was defying his God, the one who put breath in his young, the one who created everything. He was defying him. Well, I have used Amazon affiliate link is in the description, and I think when I see